Welcome to A New Perspective with your host, Pastor Mike Sherbino, who for this show we need to point out is the father of 5 daughters. Because today we ask, how do we raise girls to resist what our next guest calls toxic Christian teachings about sex, self, and speaking up for themselves? Today, Sheila Wray Gregoire is doing everything in her own power to give girls the tools they need to know about their own personal power. Things that are very difficult to bring up, but necessary. In her latest book, She Deserves Better, Gregoire asks the tough questions like, what if the church is setting up our daughters to be small? What if the most common teachings girls hear in youth group make them more likely to marry an abuser, or less likely to understand consent, and more likely to blame themselves if they are assaulted? And is the church working against them? Armed with data from a survey with more than 27,000 women in the wake of many sexual abuse scandals within the church, Gregoire and her fellow authors make no apologies, as their message truly is a harbinger of things the church must know to help girls thrive as they grow.
Well, we got an amazing subject today. Maybe, perhaps amazing is not the right word, but Hollie, I'm glad you're here with me.
Yes, I'm going to help you navigate it.
You got to help me because we're going to talk about girls.
Yes.
I got 5 daughters. I still haven't got it all figured out. I'm just going to confess that right away.
It's
Self-esteem.
policy.
Self-esteem is one word.
Yeah.
A lot of other words that start with S as well, and we're going to get to that as well. But do you ever struggle with self-esteem?
Of course, I was.
Well, what did it look like from your perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I'm mixed. I had a single mom raising me. So from the get-go, it was a situation where I wondered what color I was. Was I white or black? Did I fit in?
Wow.
So these were all questions I've wrestled with probably since I was 4 years old.
Since you were 4?
Since I was 4, yeah.
Man, you wouldn't even think you'd be able to articulate them at that point, but this starts to shape you, doesn't it?
It does. And because you can't really articulate what's happening, you just know you're different, or you feel less than, you don't feel seen. Not having the language for it or having someone understand and be able to guide you through can really make it very, very difficult to navigate.
Well, we have somebody who's going to help us be a guide today, don't we? And you
Yes.
know her much better than I do, so tell us who our amazing guest is.
I am so excited. Sheila Wray Gregoire is joining us today. She has written a few books, including The Great Sex Rescue, followed up by her most recent book, which I have a copy of. It's called She Deserves Better. It's an incredible read. Sheila, welcome.
Thank you, Hollie, my friend. Good to be here.
Well, we're glad you're here as well. And I'm glad that Hollie's here because I think I'm just going to sit back and listen. But I'm not very good at that. I'll be jumping in. You can trust me on that. Hollie, start us off.
Yeah, absolutely. Sheila, you've had such an incredible ministry. I know there's lots of obstacles, but you're doing some incredible work. And with your most recent book, She Deserves Better, why did you and your team want to write this particular one?
Well, 2 years ago, we published The Great Sex Rescue, which was based on our survey of 20,000 women, predominantly evangelicals, asking the question, are there key beliefs in evangelicalism around sex and marriage that actually make sex worse for women and marriage worse for women? And after that was published, so many people said, I feel free, I feel validated, I finally understand what God really intended. But now I have absolutely no idea what to say to my kids because I grew up with toxic stuff. I don't want to pass toxic stuff on, but where's the middle? I don't want the pendulum to swing to the other direction. So that's what She Deserves Better is. We did another huge survey, this time of 7,000 women, to see, are there teachings in youth groups which can actually set our girls up to be small and to be hurt? And how can we do this better?
I'm going to jump in right there. Can't keep my mouth shut. Sheila, explain toxic. Give us a couple of examples. When you said you grew up with toxic stuff, I'm not sure I want to hear, but I think we need to hear.
Well, purity culture was a big movement in evangelicalism, kind of from about the mid-90s to maybe about 2015, although it's still there, just with different words. But what that basically did was it told girls that virginity and purity are the same thing. And so your goal was to protect your virginity at all costs. The problem is your virginity can be stolen. And to tell girls that they're damaged goods if they're abused is terrible, but that's what we did. But also, that's simply not biblical. If a girl does something that she regrets later or that she wishes she didn't do, Jesus does not say you're not worth anything anymore. You're a half-eaten chocolate bar, you're a rose with no petals. Jesus doesn't say that, but we did.
Hmm.
And when we measured the effects of that on 7,000 women, we found that that led to lower self-esteem, lower sexual and marital satisfaction when they got married. And it was totally unnecessary because there are better ways to talk about these things that are biblical and in line with Christ.
What's interesting is that throughout your research, you started at that level of, kind of where we are at, seeing that there was a residual impact of women who are being taught these messages. And now you're helping us teach our children. So, what are some of those youth group landmines that we'll say that are really damaging to young girls' faith?
Well, we're coming up to summer, and you know that as soon as summer starts, you get into the bikini wars, like
Oh, yeah.
in youth group. And can you wear a two-piece bathing suit? So let's talk about modesty for a minute. We measured 4 different possible iterations of the modesty message. So the idea that boys are visual in a way that girls will never understand. Boys can't help but lust if a girl is dressed like she's trying to incite it. Girls have a responsibility not to be a stumbling block to their brothers by what they wear. And a girl who is dressed immodestly is worse than a girl who isn't. And you know what? All of those messages lead to far worse self esteem, far higher rates of marrying an abuser, and even far higher rates of sexual pain. So, for instance, if a girl believes these terrible things about boys, she's 68% more likely to marry an abuser. She's 52% more likely to experience sexual pain. And evangelical women have 2.5 times the rate of sexual pain as the general population, largely because of messages like these.
Okay, I'm the pastor. So, how do I teach on that? How do I preach on that as we
The
talk
way the
about the
Bible
whole?
does.
Okay, I
Sorry,
want to
let
hear.
me just jump in here. The Bible never ever ever pairs the modesty message with the lust message. The
Good
Bible
point.
never says watch what you wear because you could cause someone to sin. When the Bible talks about modesty, it's talking about not flaunting wealth. And when the Bible talks about lust, it puts the responsibility on the man.
I'm so glad that you have said that. That's good
Hmm.
because we've
So,
heard it so often the other way.
mhm.
And I have lived this conversation many times in our own home around our dinner table. What's right, what's not right. How do we dress? How do we not dress? And
Yeah.
and we live in a very provocative world where, I just pick up my phone and you can see just about anything you want or even the stuff that you don't want or don't need.
Mhm.
Okay,
But
so what do you say to the
in the
boys?
book, well, for boys, you just simply teach them that you got to respect women. You got to respect girls. And no girl has the power to make you sin. That is a choice that you are making. I do think it's very, very important to tell our boys that noticing someone is pretty or finding someone attractive is not a sin, because I think we have so conflated noticing with lusting that we've made a whole bunch of 12, 13, 14-year-old boys think they're sinning when they're not. And that makes them feel helpless and it makes them feel a lot of shame. So we need to do much better job at that. But in the book, we do have discussion starters and questions that you can work through with your daughter. You can use them for your son too, about how to talk about clothing choices in a way that doesn't pair it with the idea of I am causing someone else to sin.
Hmm. That was a huge weight. I know personally that was placed on young girls, and you're just thinking, how does my choices of what I wear impact somebody like that who's older, who's more mature, who might even be a role model to me? And it was definitely a conflicting message growing up.
Yeah, we looked at one curriculum that was aimed at girls 8 to 12, the Secret Keeper Girl curriculum, now True Girl, and it was an event that went all across Canada with Dana Gresh, and she had this raise and praise test. So she told girls, put your arms up in the air, and if any belly shows, that's bad because bellies are intoxicating. And then she went on to explain, have a conversation moms and daughters should have about what intoxicating means and how it's like being drunk and getting out of control. And she said, God made our bodies to intoxicate men, but you're only supposed to intoxicate one man, so you need to cover up. So let me be very clear. We told hundreds of thousands of girls, 8-year-old girls, that the sight of their belly could cause an adult man to get out of control. And
Okay.
no one said, holy cow, we need to stop this.
Well, let's hold that thought because we're going to talk more about it. We're going to be right back after this break. Loving this conversation. I think it's about 30 years too late. But
Yes.
you know what? We're going to milk it for all it's worth. So stay with us. We're going to be right back.
Throughout this chapter, it's all about her deferring to the guy. If she knows more about a subject than he does, she has to make sure that he doesn't feel badly. But why isn't she allowed to take pride in something that she knows about?
Why isn't she allowed to just confidently be the one who knows more?
Yeah. But she can't do that because that would wreck his confidence. And so it's like he is due confidence that she isn't. And we see this throughout our literature for teen girls and evangelicalism. Lies young women believe told girls that they should be starting to submit to the boys around them as practice for when they're married. We saw this in many of our resources, as the girls are told, you are supposed to submit to his leadership now so that you don't start expecting anything.
We've been having a very important conversation with Sheila Wray Gregoire, who's an author and a speaker. Her new book is called She Deserves Better. It's helping women like me that have young kids talk about how we can encourage self-esteem and self-respect in our daughters when maybe we were taught some toxic messages. So Sheila, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Yeah, it's been fun so far.
Okay, I got my hip waders on. I'm going to go in deeper here now. So Sheila, here we go. We only have so much time in this program. You've said some very powerful things. Give a couple comments to advise me as a pastor, what I say to young men. What is the narrative that needs to change in the church?
We need to hold men accountable for their behavior. And often we don't. So let me give you a few more examples of things that have been said to girls. Shanti Feldon wrote a book called For Young Women Only. And in it, she shared her survey. And I'm about to give you a stat. I don't think this stat is accurate because I don't believe her question was worded properly, but I'll give you the stat anyway. She said that 82% of boys felt either little ability or little responsibility to stop in a makeout situation. And her conclusion was, if you want to stop it, it is safest to not even start. Here's the issue. 100% of boys have the ability to stop. 100% of boys have the responsibility to stop if she says no. And the fact that we're telling girls that some guys may not have the ability or responsibility is horrifying. And we talked to so many women in our focus groups who were date raped as teenagers and didn't realize it for decades because they thought, well, I started, and then what did I expect? And some of our books actually say that. What did you expect?
It seems to me that as I'm listening, that what we really need to do is establish a curriculum to help to rewrite the narrative or to erase the old narrative that's been imprinted in girls' minds and also in guys' minds from a whole different perspective to change that. And that's the road you're on right now, if I'm correct.
Yes, and I'm just praying that more youth leaders will read She Deserves Better too, because youth leaders, they want to have a great youth ministry. They don't want to hurt anybody. And I don't even think the authors of some of these books meant to hurt, but we didn't know any better. And now we do. And so we have to do better because we hurt a lot of women in particular. And that it's just irresponsible not to change.
Sorry, I'm just going to jump in because you just mentioned something about women and how they are being hurt. And so can we talk about how the modesty rules have enabled some of the more predatory behavior? And what can we do to help the next generation have the self-esteem or the self-respect even to be able to have the confidence to walk away if needed?
Yeah, so when you tell girls that adult men especially can be made out of control by what you're wearing, then if a girl is assaulted, she is going to think, I'm responsible for this at some level. And we need to be the kind of church where if an adult man says that that 13-year-old is a stumbling block, we don't hand the 13-year-old a sweater. We freak out on the adult man
Yeah.
because that's not okay.
Yeah.
And we have portrayed men as being so out of control that the answer to that is for women to cover up and for wives to have a whole lot of sex so their husbands don't lust or do something bad, and for single women to cover up and to be the gatekeepers to make sure the makeout situation never goes too far. And we need to start holding men accountable and stop making women feel like they are guilty if they are hurt. We found that 18.7% of our survey takers were assaulted or abused in church as teenagers. 12.9% of our survey takers were assaulted or abused or harassed by an adult.
Mm.
It really is heartbreaking to hear. And yeah, it's hard for me even to hear that because we want our churches to be a safe place and we're continually hearing horrific stories. What practical ways can I start? In a church or with other pastors that I influence? What do? Do we take a show with you? We take a show and we just start plastering it everywhere, and we're going to do that with this one. But what do we do?
Yes.
What's the conversation that we need to have with sons and daughters?
Well, let me give you the good news first, and that is that church attendance is good. Believing in Jesus is good. When you follow women who went to church as kids, they tend to do better in terms of marital sexual satisfaction and self-esteem long term. So yay us, we're doing better. But here's the big issue. Once women internalize a lot of these negative messages, the benefits of church disappear. And for many women, it would have been better if they hadn't gone to church at all, if you look at their marital outcomes and self-esteem outcomes. And we need to grapple with that. And we need to stop assuming that just because our church teaches the gospel, that it is a safe place. And if our people are being hurt, then we need to ask, are we really preaching the gospel? Do we really have the gospel? And that's the question that we're asking, and She Deserves Better. So I just encourage people to grapple with our findings. In a lot of ways, they're sobering, but in other ways, they do remind us that Jesus helps. Jesus is good, and believing in Jesus leads to great outcomes. And so we just need to get back to Christ and away from a lot of these shaming messages that we've had in the church.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting too with your book, it's as a mom, amazing to have that resource, but other women are reading this as well, aren't they?
Yeah, we've had so many women. We had about 1,000 people in our launch team, and so many women said, "I am just reading this to reparent myself. I don't even have kids." Many of them aren't even married, but they're like, "Little 15-year-old me needed this so badly." And
Yeah.
so I am reading this for little 15-year-old me.
Well, Sheila, I want to say thank you for coming on the show. There's never enough time with most of our guests, but especially with you today, because the subject it brings up many questions in my mind of what we can do better, what we need to change, but also for the healing that needs to happen for so many people, and in particular women. And I really applaud what you're doing. And from the perspective, I hope that you would let us know how we can help you, you get the message out. We're going to be sharing this across the country and through social media. And we hope that you'll come back very soon to pick up the next part of the subject.
Yeah, I would love that. Thank you.
Well, thanks for taking the time to be with us. And folks, why don't you stay with us, because we'll be right back as Hollie and I talk a little bit about what we've all heard together right now.
Many of us feel broken, like our lives are shattered beyond repair. But we all have a choice to throw away those broken pieces, or let the one who created us restore them.
You know, Holly, as I'm processing all of this, help me to understand what we've just heard from your perspective.
Yeah, we've just heard something revolutionary, something that has confirmed a lot of women's questions. Is this the right teaching? Why does it feel intrinsically wrong, but yet my spiritual leaders are saying this is what we have to do?
What would be one of the wrong things that you felt in the church as
Yeah.
you grew up?
I mean, I always felt like just being female in the church was detrimental. And I could
Serious?
never live out God's full calling for my life because I was female.
You know,
Yeah.
as I'm thinking back, I can realize how you can feel about that. We've seen a whole movement, even in the secular world, though, with women taking on incredible roles in business, but always still feeling
Mhm.
oppressed or put down.
Yeah.
You've struggled with that?
Oh, absolutely. And in the Christian industries, we are that much further behind mainstream. And it is a chasm that I do hope will close soon, where women can be in more key leadership roles at the table, as they say more frequently in the Christian realm, like we're seeing happening in the business world.
You have 2 children.
I do. I have 2. Surprise!
And the third one you're married to, but other than that. So how's this book going to impact how you parent with them? What are you going to tell them?
I'm so excited for this book. I've had a chance to speak with Sheila.
And you have girls.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so I spoke with Sheila on the show I do on Joy Radio, Good Company, also on the podcast that we do called Why Me Project. And so following her journey just gives me extra, I don't want to say chutzpah, but it gives me more fervor to make sure that I'm teaching my daughters differently. And so for me, this book gives me a chance to relearn the lessons or unlearn the lessons that weren't so healthy. And allows me to have the verbiage to teach my 9-year-old and my 7-year-old in a way they understand about their sexuality and how God loves us for us. Our purity is based on our relationship with Him, not on what we wore or what we did.
Powerful.
Yeah.
Hey, we're glad you're watching, glad you're listening. If you're like me, I'm just internalizing and processing things. And it's been a great conversation today. I think it's going to get even greater in just a moment because I want to take us to a passage of Scripture that helps us to find focus in these turbulent times that we're living in so that we can understand how God wants us to walk with Him as His children. Stay tuned. We're going to be right back.
Hi, I'm Rachel Joy Barbeau, former national sportscaster, founder of I'm Changing the Narrative, and upcoming author of a book called Relentless Joy. I'll tell you about that in a moment. But first, I want to drop a nugget of wisdom on you. Have you even pondered? I talk about this about upcoming book, what your ancestors went through. I'm talking about your grandmother's grandmother, and your grandfather times 20 for you to even be alive today. Odds are they went through being displaced from their land. They might have gone through slavery. They might have gone through the Depression. They might have gone through food scarcity. You don't know what they went through just for you to be alive today. So let me drop this on you. How dare you not go for that dream? How dare you not go for that job? How dare you not start that business? How dare you not mend that relationship? How dare you not live your life to the absolute fullest? They gave everything for you to be alive today. And so did Jesus, by the way. They lived their life. They overcame so much just for you to be alive today. So go and do it. And also, please grab a copy of Relentless Joy. I'd love to connect with you and see you soon.
As we process what we've been talking about today, and in the grand scheme, we need to think about what are the grand essentials. And Ben Patterson has written a book, and in it, he tells a story. He has a story about old age. Hear it in the context of what we've been talking about with Sheila. Hear it in the context of what Rachel has just shared in that short clip that we had of her speaking life into people's lives. But Ben Patterson says this: I have a theory about old age. I believe that when life has whittled us down to the bare essentials, when joints and skin have wrinkled, and capillaries have clogged and hardened what is left of us, what will be left will be what we've been all along in our senescence. He said, Exhibit A is a distant uncle. All his life, he spent his time looking and trying to find money. nothing else than looking for new ways to get rich. He spent his sentences very comfortably at the end, drooling and babbling about the money he had made. But when life whittled him down to his essence, all that was left of him was raw greed. This is what he cultivated in 1,000 ways over his lifetime. Exhibit B, he said, is my wife's grandmother. And when she died in her mid-80s, she already had been senile for several years. What did this lady talk about? He said, the best example I can think of is when we asked her to pray before dinner. She would reach out her hand and hold the hands of those sitting beside her. A broad smile would come across her face. Her dim eyes would fill with tears as she looked up to heaven, and her chin would quaver as she poured out her love to Jesus. This was Edna in a nutshell. She loved Jesus and she loved people. She couldn't remember our names, but she couldn't help keeping her hands from patting us lovingly whenever we got near her. When life whittled her down to her essence, all there was left was love. Love for God and love for people. What does it mean for you to love God? What does it mean for you to love people? What does it mean for you as a man to love the people that are around you, to look purely and in a wholesome way at a woman and respect her for who she is, not as something second rate, as even Hollie referred to, feeling less than the best as she grew up? What does that mean for all of us? What does that mean for you as a woman as you've unpacked and processing some of the things that have been shared today? I hope that it has become the first or second step in a stairwell to finding freedom, to discovering that you are loved, that you are precious to God. Early this morning, as I was reading in my Bible, I came to Psalm 51. And maybe this is a good way to close today because the psalmist wrote these words. They're words for all of us. He said, God, create in me a clean heart and renew a right spirit within me. And don't cast me away from your presence, and don't take your Holy Spirit from me, but restore to me the joy of your salvation and uphold me with a willing spirit, so that whether as a young person or as an old person, we will live to the glory of God, that we will be very slow to point the finger of accusation against someone else, thinking they're the cause for my sin or my stumbling, but that we'll own what we've done. We'll own our own story. We'll say, God, I'm inviting you to make me into the person you want me to be, because I believe that you love me, that I'm a person of great worth. Keep me from being that uncle who just was drooling and babbling over money. Help me to be like Aunt Edna, who in our senescence, even in those last days, will be pouring out our heart of praise to Jesus, the one who loves us. And he is the one who loves you.